Epcot will take its cue from the new ideas and new technologies that are now emerging from the creative centers of American industry. It will be a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world for the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise.
And Walt wanted to put on film and demonstrate some of the concepts he had. And as we interpret that film, because we had a lot to do with putting it together, was that he wanted to demonstrate how a city of tomorrow, if they could start from scratch, could build a transportation way to handle all the transportation problems of a city. And already I think that was if you could start from scratch and build a city, this is the way it would work. Like your transportation would come in from the bottom, you'd have your green belts, you'd have your cultural center downtown and all those things. But in our opinion, you know, he was smart enough to know that if you build a city, they would be old the day you build it. And see, what we really have evolved, it's the best thinking within our organization, is that Walt Disney World is really, that whole 27,000 acres is the experimental prototype community of tomorrow. And within the framework of that, we have a Magic Kingdom, and we have campgrounds, and we have recreation. And now what he wanted to do, what we decided to do, and he wanted to do it, I'm pretty sure too, was to build a place that would be a showcase for this technology and a show place for the demonstration of the people-to-people program, which we call World Showcase. And everything. I think the importance of the project for the guest that comes to Florida is we're trying to present information and knowledge in an entertaining way. And I think the world's ready for that. We have many problems in the world, in our country, in our cities, in our states today, and I think a better informed public will make it easier to solve these problems, and that's just what Epcot is going to do. In 1955, when Walt, you know, we were just in the movie and television and merchandising and publishing business, he put us into the outdoor recreation business with Disneyland in '55. And then that followed with our 1971 Walt Disney World, which broadened the base again, and now we're a $1 billion company. But right now, with this Epcot idea, it's a sound idea, it's right on. And if the young creative people of our entire organization really believe in that, and we have top management now to help them bring these ideas to pass, I think that the next 10 years can be the most rewarding that the company's ever had. And I think Walt would be real proud, because I always used to say, even before Disneyland in the late 40s, that someday Walt would be better known as an educator of bringing information to people in a meaningful way. And if this all happens, it'd be kind of fun to have a feeling like that come true. But the possibility is there.
Well, really, what Walt was trying to do, he was trying to sell a concept, an idea. And he asked Herbie Ryman, who's still alive, who has always done all of our renderings, to, Herbie, make me a picture. Because Walt believed that a picture really says 1,000 words. And Herbie came up with this high-rise building and kind of a radiating out kind of a concept. And it was really to sell an idea and a concept, because what Walt wanted to show the people of the world, he wanted to show them two things. One, how you can take virgin land, which we have 43 square miles here, and develop it properly without government subsidy and through the free enterprise system. And he also wanted to show, through proper planning, how you could develop property properly and enhance the environment and not take away from it. I think one of the hopes that Walt had was that this place, Walt Disney World, Epcot, would give an opportunity to people from all over the world, in government, in business and education, and just plain ordinary people, and even some government people, to come here in a place where it's an environment that will enhance communication. Because the one thing that is truly accepted throughout the world is entertainment. And I think that first and foremost, Walt Disney World, experimental prototype community of tomorrow, is entertaining. But it's going to give a place where people can come and spend some time, have a vacation, but also learn and hopefully sit down together and try to solve some of the problems that exist in the world and that will exist in the future. And I think that we really have shown the world that you can take a project and through proper planning enhance the environment and not take away from it. But I think the key thing to this whole project, we've established an environment that's clean, it's friendly, it's safe, and it's fun. And that's why we're so successful, because if you put people, no matter from what country they're from, what nationality, if you put them together in the proper environment, you truly have a place where everybody can have fun together. And I think that's what this project's all about.
How does that work?
Well, it's a very involved process, requiring a tremendous number of people with a variety of different skills, all working together as a team. Starting from the very beginning in the strategic planning, the master planning, determining how the whole scheme of things fits together in the corporate plans, short-term and long-term. The basic planning, starting with the land use planning that is necessary, and the proper use of the land available, the proper site location, how that land is going to be used properly, effectively, and efficiently. Then next, moving into the design phase, where the designers, our artists, sculptors, model makers, story writers, start conceptualizing the project and developing the concept that is continually refined right up to opening and after opening, as you know. From the design phase, it moves into engineering, where the engineers then are faced with the task of engineering and trying to bring into three-dimensional form with the designer and the story writer and the artist conceived as a total overall project or an individual pavilion that we see around us here. And that engineering is all of the basic skills, the facility, the electronic engineering, all of the engineering talent necessary to bring into three-dimensional form the concepts of the designers. From that point, as you know, it requires the material availability, the production, manufacturing, and eventually the construction. All of these activities have to work together, and all of these people need to communicate and maintain a close liaison and relationship from the very beginning, right from the start of strategic master planning, right through the construction. And what then brings it all together is our very fine project management organization. It really is a matrix organization. You have functional departments responsible for certain activities of many projects. Design is involved in every project that we are involved in. But then you have a project management organization, and you have a project director or manager who's responsible for a project, all elements of it, and he then works with the master planning, the strategic planning, the design, the engineering, the production, manufacturing, the construction, to try to bring it all together. They, in fact, are the glue that allows us to accomplish very massive, complicated projects such as Epcot Center. I think generally we're going to want to stay with the philosophy that we want to provide the finest in family entertainment to our guests. That can take many different forms. It can also be in many different parts of the world. We're evaluating those now. We're in strategic planning, master planning of what will lie ahead for this company and for all of us as employees of this company. I think the future is very, very exciting. I think with the opening of Epcot Center, it brings us to a whole new plateau of where this company can go in the future. I think just as when we opened Disneyland, it brought us to a whole new plateau. With the opening of Walt Disney World in 1971, it was a stepping stone to allow us then to bring us to the point where we are now with the opening of Epcot Center. With Tokyo Disneyland opening in March of 1983, the base of this company is so substantial that it's going to be an exciting future for all of us and for this company.
Intent was to have a logo, something easily identifiable with Epcot. And that the sphere is such a unique structure in itself, and the fact that it had never been completely elevated off the ground, I think, was one of the contributing factors in the final decision of having this type of structure as a identification of Epcot. That we do want to give our guests a glimpse into what the future might be, and in doing so, showing unique building materials, unique structures, and taking the latest technology that's available and showcasing it for our guests.
Well, I think there'll be quite a difference, actually, especially when we're considering World Showcase with the authentic costuming in the pavilions of the World Showcase. For instance, the German pavilion or the Canadian pavilion, it's actually the costume or the clothes worn from the country itself, a festival costume or something like that. And in Future World, I think you're going to see more updated, futuristic, sleeker lines and things like that than we even do in Tomorrowland now. So I think you're going to see some nice things, some updated fabrics, some stretch gabardines and things like that that weren't on the market when we did the Magic Kingdom that we're just now getting into. Very important to us. That's our life's bread, I think, is keeping up to date with the fabrics. Unless fabrics perform in our system, laundry system, wearing system, things like that, we're not going to stay in business too long. We've got to pick the best fabrics we absolutely can to last in our system, to fit the employees correctly. Otherwise, the stuff is just going to wear out. You can understand if you laundered your own clothes, the stuff you wear every day yourself, day in and day out, it wears out very rapidly. Well, we go for the best thing available on the market so it will withstand our system.
The size, the fact that it's something entirely new, it's two distinct areas, you know, a future world which is unique and different, and I don't know if anybody really knows what is a futuristic costume or super contemporary, whatever. It's massive, this thing, and of course the World Showcase is also another very different project, and it poses its own problems, but I guess it's a number of designs that we have, probably about 1,400 of them, and the audio animatronic figures are not like the little Small World dolls that we've developed in our parks. These are life-size figures, and some of them are animals. One of them is a dragon character that's going to be very unique and different in the imagination and so on. We got a lot of unique things, I think. We've been working on this for about 2.5, 3 years now. In fact, we have a design center, a production center we call it, in Anaheim, where I've isolated a team of people that handle the design and coordinate the manufacturing of all the costumes for this project. And that's really all they've been doing for about 2.5 years now, research and so on. I don't think there's a fabric made today that we don't use some of somewhere, whether it be in our operational costumes, or our audio animatronic costumes, or entertainment costumes. We use frilly fabrics, and we use metallics and brocades, and we use fur fabrics of all types, short pile, long pile, just every kind of fabric made. But to get something that will perform in this climate, under these conditions, and that can be washed and or dry cleaned once a day, every day, under industrial conditions, that's quite a task. And also it has to be comfortable. It has to, in many cases, relate to a period in time, a certain texture or pattern or weave. And it would be simple if we were doing maintenance costumes, as an example. That fabric's developed to be washed 150 times, okay, and that's great, except we're doing themed period costumes that have to be colorful and, you know, have certain pattern and texture, and really that's quite a task. It really is. It's the amount of fabric that we buy, really. If we were doing an airline and you're going to order a few 100,000 yards in any one color or pattern, it would be a cinch because you could have it all made. As I said, we have 1,400 designs, and if you figure with that many designs, you cannot buy a lot of any one particular fabric. So you have to find something that exists or get somebody to make you 500 yards or 1,000, and their minimums are 10,000. It's very difficult.
But essentially, it works like the plans for a building. You work up a concept, and that's in harmony and synchronized with what the art directors are doing. Let's say Showcase, for example. You try to do a landscape that extends the illusion the art director has conceived for France or Germany or China, Japan, Mexico, as the case may be. And you develop a preliminary drawing, and then you get a working drawing, and that goes out to the field like any blueprint. And you people then, the construction people, have to take that set of drawings and the plant material that it calls for and put them together and put them in the ground, and that results in something like this, these trees, palms, and the oaks lining the avenue. But the best laid plans also require a little interpretation. As you go along, you've got to communicate to the people who are doing the installation what you had in your mind when you put down those marks on the paper. And when you put down some of these squiggly designs and patterns, you've got to give them a little guidance so that it comes out the way you had in mind. You know, this is a substantial challenge. It is a very large undertaking, and it's so varied. All of the elements that go into this thing, the future world here, and all of this imaginative design and architecture and structure, we're trying to pick up and reinforce as we go around the lagoon there. And World Showcase, of course, we try to bring out the character of China, the character of Mexico, the character of France, Canada, and this is I said it was a challenge. It is a challenge, but it's a tremendous satisfaction to make it happen.
Well, I started collecting trees about 2 years ago, collecting from all over the United States. And this project is so enormous. And we're using approximately 12,000 trees. We're using 14 acres of this really fine emerald zoysia sod, and about 3 acres of annual color, and a little over 200,000 shrubs. So it's a big project. It is huge. And in the Future World side, of course, it's quite a different plant pellet than you see at Showcase. In Showcase, we're trying to assimilate and to complement the architecture of the various nations with plants that are indigenous to that country. So it's been a big task. It's been a fun job as well. Not only the collecting of the plant material, coordinating the construction effort and the scheduling. So it has been very exciting. In Future World, of course, you'll see a lot of trees that are in colonnades with different shapes, square ones, round ones, and of course in front of imagination you'll see some trees that are shaped in the form of prismatic forms, and so it'll be very exciting. And a lot of man-made carefully man-made pruning, and the trees adapt to them very well, but you'll see something very unusual here in the Future World as far as trees, different types of trees are concerned, and the shapes, and plus the different types of trees we're using in Future World. Some very unusual ones. Well, it took a couple years in the process, of course, in the design stage of working with the civil drawings and with the general traffic flow. And that was the initial stage, but the enormity of the project is unbelievable, and especially with the various types of plant material we're using here. and various types of shrubs. So we're using annuals that we've never used even in a theme park before because they are unusual color combinations. But the vastness of this project, it's really hard to explain. It really is.
I think what we're trying to do is to show the state of the art, you might say, and the latest techniques today being talked about by agricultural scientists from throughout the world. I think what we need is public awareness of these ideas that are being talked about. And I think that once people see these ideas, that we will have millions coming through this pavilion, and that maybe they will make it even better through what they see. Maybe it will serve as a catalyst to new ideas. So we hope that through what they see in the state of the art, but also ideas that may not be feasible today, but alternatives in the future, that this in turn will pave the way to growing food economically in new ways. Most people have seen corn and beans, for example, but when they see the corn itself used as they pull for the pull bean, they'll say, my golly, why didn't I think of that? And let's go home and try it. Or they'll see new kinds of crops, like the wing bean, for example. I think most people have never heard of the wing bean. And to know that you can eat every portion of that plant, and to have them realize that in the future plant scientists will be working on plants to provide more than one portion of that plant will be food. That no longer are we running around in our boots with chickens in and out of the house and around the house. Today, agriculture is really a very sophisticated industry, and that it really is the well-being of every country and has been the foundation of America.
Is that we would like people to appreciate the importance of agriculture, and that really all of our culture is built on the fact that somebody is out there working to feed us. And we've gotten so far away from it, I think we sometimes forget the significance of it. And I think people have a basic need to be close to the land and to understand growing things, plants, etc. In the United States now, one farmer feeds 78 of us. And it's the fact that that farmer is out there feeding us that allows us to do things like enjoy Epcot. And I think we have to pay attention to the agricultural sector, and that's part of the story here. As you see here, the state of the art, where we are today, the guest gets to see every significant plant that's being produced in the world is shown here in these controlled environment greenhouses. And then we speculate on some possible future significant plants or possible future superstars, things like the wing bean and other crops. And then at the end of the ride, we even speculate on the future itself, and we look at possibly food production on top of skyscrapers in the future in controlled environment systems. We even go so far as to say there's ways that we can produce food in space when we get around to colonizing space.
Saying about the land.
I think they'll see it as a tremendously important thing, that this will be the greatest showplace for agriculture to the general public. And the fact that the public will understand some of the problems and some of the potential and the importance of agriculture will register very significantly on the people in that field. I think it'll tell the home gardener that there's some nifty new attractive techniques that are going to be available to them that they may not know about till now. Some of these are complicated, they're going to have to pay attention, they're going to have to work at it, but there's going to be some fun things that they can do themselves.
The land is a very unique opportunity to reach the public with regard to agriculture. I see it as a showplace for agriculture where we can bring in the average person and get them excited about agriculture. You know, there are only about 5% of our population today that's directly involved in agriculture, which means that we really have a major selling job to do with the other 95% who often take agriculture and food production for granted. This will give us an opportunity to bring them in, show them the major food crops, show them some of the potential food crops of the future. We want eventually to be able to show them all the new and or exciting things that are going on in agriculture today. One place where they can come and see these things and learn about them. Basically, we have a show place here where we can show the important crops, where we can show the important new technologies, some of the really important concepts in agriculture like integrated pest management, robotics, computers, and that sort of thing, which we will eventually incorporate into the show. Of course, in agriculture, I think most people would predict that things are going to change slowly and that agriculture in the future will be very much like it is today. We, on the other hand, can make some improvements. We can bring more crops into play. There are some crops that have tremendous future potential. They're lacking mainly exposure. We have an opportunity to show these to people, to give them the exposure that they need.
I think that's one of the most extraordinary advantages we have is we've lived with the work. We've actually lived with people, walked with people. Walt said, get down there. I want you guys down there. He gave us, I think it was twice a month, something like that. Or maybe it couldn't have been twice a week. We were too busy. But get down there and stand in line. He said, don't you guys go walking in the back door. He said, you stand in line with people and listen to them. You sit down with them. And I don't know where any group of designers or anybody that has to do with the public could have that kind of experience on a day-to-day basis. And this is what we're talking about. How do you reach people? How do you communicate with people? Because that's the name of the game. You know, how do they identify you and what you do? Do they identify it correctly the way you wanted it to? And this kind of a thing, I don't think any design group or even motion picture people were generally sharper than others about the awareness of what the power of the image. I don't know where they would have an opportunity like that on such a long sustained time to get this grasp of the reaction to people to their work. Because most designers never go near their work again. Certainly architects never have to live in their buildings. And I suppose that's what makes WED as a design group really unique in the world. I don't think any other people have had that experience. You can't get it out of books. Because that's one marvelous thing about this company, I think, is the fact that we really never have finished anything. We're always changing things. We're always, in a way, keeping up with the particularly technical development, but I think psychically, I think motion picture people have some very sensitive antennas, and they sense, in a way, the direction of people. This is the only way you can communicate. The language is a very fluid thing, but particularly the visual type of language, and to be able to speak visually in a literate way, you have to be highly aware of how these images are being read in that great stream of consciousness out there.
We are making theatrical breakthroughs in terms of our method of presentation by taking the largest rear-projected screen that's ever been done, combining that with mid-ground dimensional sets, as you saw, and foreground audio animatronics figures to create a complete theatrical environment that actually changes before your eyes. And that's our magic machine for telling the story. In terms of the story itself and what we're trying to tell, I spent many, many hours here working in the evening with Dr. Alan Yarnell, who's professor of history at UCLA, to lay out, once we had the tools at our hand, what do we want to tell about America with those tools? And what direction can we go in? And I think, in all honesty, we've done a good job at representing many, many new beginnings and new notions, new starts, if you will, into a new frontier in American history. So people are coming here to be entertained, and within the framework of that entertainment, we are informing them a little bit about American history. And we're not saying this is the final statement on American history. What we're really saying here is that here are some of the great moments in American history. Here are some of the great dreamers and doers. Our show, as it is the longest show that we've ever produced in wet history. It's 28 minutes long. And to really tell the American adventure story in its totality, we would have to be going to probably 500 hours of programming on television to do this. You, the audience, are sitting over a gigantic underground wagon on which all the sets are placed. It weighs 375,000 pounds, and it must move under us with absolute silence and vibration-free motion, and move forward and index within a fraction of an inch to perfect indexing, bring the figures up in total silence. And you think of all the hydraulics and all the mechanics and all the laws of physics that you must almost violate to try to make that happen. That was the biggest challenge of anything. The American adventure does not shy from the struggle that we've had. We don't say, gee, things are just great. You know, people are dying on the screen up here. There's a struggle that's going on. And yet somehow the persevering aspect of that, coming out of that struggle, we're always a little bit better. But we look at the Civil War with a very harsh photographic reality that's in there. We look at the Pilgrim Landing with a very harsh reality. And we look at World War I that way, even though it has the glamour aspect of the dogfight up there. Still, it's technology bringing another degree of human conflict into this thing. We look at the Depression in terms of the reality, and they're persevering. So I think what it says is that the American adventure is and probably will always be a struggle. We're going through a hell of a struggle right now in this country. And if you look at it, without that frame of reference, that things have been tough in the past, stop crying about what's happening right now, then you realize that if you apply yourself, you can move forward. That's the positive note that's there, is that it's that ending quote that I'm talking about. And that's the warning that Steinbeck gives. Now we face the danger which in the past has been the most destructive to the human. Success, plenty, comfort, and ever-increasing leisure. No dynamic people has ever survived those dangers. And we have it right now, don't we? You look anywhere and everything, success, plenty, comfort, and ever-increasing leisure, is exactly what we're embracing right now. That's a warning about today. And if we say, gee, things are really tough, smog is out there, we can't cope with it, let's move somewhere else, let's become the proverbial ostrich with the head in the sand. That's not what we're dealing with. They're dealing with facing reality, and we show that people in the past faced reality, they overcame it. They didn't just sit there and pontificate about the world going by, but they got in the mainstream of life and they moved forward with it and contributed.
So I look upon the Epcot Center itself, at the very center of it, Spaceship Earth, as a kind of Schweitzer centrifuge. Schweitzer was always telling us what? That we should set examples, someone may imitate them, preferably good examples. So if you put the children in this centrifuge of Spaceship Earth and whirl them around, filled with the ideas of the far past, the immediate present, and the far future, they'll come out galvanized and care very much about getting out of bed tomorrow morning. That's what you must do for children. The educational process must do it, teachers must do it, and we must do it. And let's be there ahead of the teachers this time. Huh? Let's say to the children, for God's sake, the future is worth building. And as we move along through not only building Epcot Center, but rebuilding it over the years. It's not going to be finished this year, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. Walt knew that and spoke of it that way. Along the way, you rip the ideas down and say, hey, we didn't do it quite right this time. But now 2 years from now, we'll improve it a little.
In this ride, the problem was how to show you, the audience, riding in our little cars that move through the attraction, roughly in a simple way, the history of transportation from the caveman down to the present. Well, it's one thing to show what happened in different situations. It's another problem to be entertaining. Because I'd worked on many sequences at Disney Studios and involved gags and humor and so forth, I decided that the best approach would be to treat the whole idea of going through these epochs of transportation change all the way from the point where man worked or walked on his 2 feet to the time he had automobiles and jet planes, treat it as a light subject. In other words, sort of tongue-in-cheek. We've taken historical facts and embellished them with a little fantasy and a little humor. So, unlike some of the rides, we've not gotten very serious about the whole thing. We figure it's better to accept the history with a laugh than try to throw facts and figures at you and just make it a mundane ride where we show this happened and this happened and this happened. The main thing was to make this ride look authentic. All of the wagons, all of the props, as I said before, had to be right out of the history book. No cheating. The costumes had to be correct, the right period. And if our situation involved a little imagination or we'd go for a laugh, fine, but it had to look authentic. We approached this much the way I would do a film, a cartoon film or an animated film or a comedy. We'd take each serious episode in history of how man got around in these vehicles, and we'd say, what can we do to get a little chuckle or a slight whimsical laugh? And my training as a gag man in the early days of Disney's, where we used to be paid $5 for a gag and $10 for a really good gag, it developed all of us to think that way. So coming on the transportation ride problem, I applied the same rules. We weren't making a film necessarily, but the rules of entertainment and staging and developing a gag, the timing, were all the same.
Because what Walt was really doing was sketching out something that as a talking point, a beginning of the story, if you will. And as a matter of fact, certainly in everything I ever worked on, and I think most of the people at the studio in WED can say the same thing, I don't think I can think of one single thing that started in one direction and ended up exactly the same or even close enough to being the same as how it started to bear a close resemblance to it. So when I say scene one, it was really step one. It was a beginning way of explaining what Walt had in mind. In no way are we setting out in this project to say that Disney has all the answers. In no way are we saying that Epcot Center presents all the answers. What we are presenting are turn-ons about each of these subjects. Something to get you interested, excited about these subjects so you want to know more about it. And now, within the last few months, we've finally gotten around to taking the next step, which is, okay, now I'm excited about it. What do I do? Where are other sources of information? We will have in Epcot Center, initially in the Earth Station, a series of brochures that will be available to people, sending them to non-advocate sources of other information about food, about energy, about imagination, about transportation. I would say that there are two aspects then, Bob, that in the development of an idea that are the most difficult to accomplish. One is making a valid story out of the concept you're dealing with. And in the whole process, you know, we have the most experienced group of people in the world at doing this. And that includes people that have been in the Disney organization for 40 years. And yet, even with that, in the Epcot Center project, we did 2 or 3 versions of the World of Motion. We did 2 whole pavilions of the land before we came up with one that really worked. We had innumerable ways of doing Spaceship Earth, including warehouse buildings that the cars went through while the dome, whatever that turned out to be, it was actually actually sat on the ground for a long time before it was lifted up and became a sphere. But we, at one point in time, the engineering group was very much against trying to take a ride through that. So we had a warehouse building that the ride went through. We did probably 3 or 4 different versions of different aspects of the energy story. So what I'm saying is, more than likely, the first idea, and probably the second idea, isn't going to work for one reason or another. And I think the fact that our company is willing to give us the time to work out these problems is the reason that Disney is Disney. And the willingness to abandon something that isn't working rather than forcing it through is a key, I think, in making our attractions what they are. It's an attempt to say to people that there are great reasons to be optimistic about the future, because we've learned from the past, and there are many people around the world working on positive solutions to the problems we all see around us. And that if we can communicate this excitement, this optimism, this potential, the possibilities of the future to people in America and around the world, then we can be a positive voice for conquering a lot of the problems, a lot of the challenges that we see around us.
Audio-animatronic figures are powered by hydraulics and pneumatic cylinders, and in some cases we actually use motors, depending upon the type of action that we use. Those cylinders are controlled through a computer system that is in Epcot Central. The information is sent out through wires out to the various theaters, and the information is then sent to the individual figures, and then it also is sent to the individual actuators in the figures, if it's an elbow or an arm swing or a head nod or a head turn. We have a great number of very innovative systems here. American Adventure, for example, has a stage, lift and carriage device that is extremely complex and very extensive. It allows us to be able to move many figures up into the spotlights. Also, in conjunction with that, we have a rear projection system. The figure now becomes a part of the scene that's showing on the back screen. They actually move in relation to that screen. It becomes part of their environment. Prior to this, we've only had them in static sets. Now we have actually moving sets. Rafts going down the river, for instance, or the sky changing in back of Chief Joseph going into a sunset while he's on stage. It's been a very, very rewarding and exciting part of my life, and I certainly would never have done anything else. I have nothing that I can think of appeals to me more than what we've been doing here. I think some people say, oh, I wish I were this, or I wish I were that, and I can't say that.
Well, in character painting, as we call it, aging, the final finishing touches to all these showcases is done by the painters, in which we try to antique or give it some kind of embellishment which provides some form of realism, so we just don't look too sterile or too stark with it. We do have a variety and a range of the amount and the type of aging we do. Some buildings we try to keep relatively clean, very light age. Others we, if the architecture calls for it, we try to get a little more severe, a little more, just a little more intense with our character work. This is done with many different procedures, usually washes, some brush work, a variation of color in our washes. We try to enhance the basic color with maybe 2 or 3 other values that are in the same color range, so that we don't get anything real dirty or too objectionable. We try to keep it rather pleasant, even though we're looking for realism with it.
Experience. We really want to bring technology of tomorrow down to a familiar framework. I think everybody would walk up without hesitation to a piano and bang out a rough tune on it, and yet one day, not too long ago, that was probably a very awesome instrument of technology, and yet we embrace it today as a musical instrument. And we really want to take the things that are just around the horizon and bring them to the public here for one of the first times in a way where they'll be able to taste and sample a bit of the technologies that are going to brighten our lives and make them not only hopeful, but absolutely more fun and exciting and bring a bright horizon.